Tonight, people shot down in cold blood. That is the scene in Myanmar right now. Pro-democracy protesters turned out again in large numbers on Thursday. They are undeterred following the bloodiest day in the demonstrations against the military coup. The UN says 38 people were killed on Wednesday, including at least 5 children. And many others have been injured. They've been detained, traumatized in the conflict. UNICEF now urging security forces to keep children out of harm's way. And we are getting an idea just how brutal Wednesday was. I want to warn you, you may find this next video difficult to watch. The security forces proceeded to kick and beat them. Keep in mind, these emergency workers are going out to help people. The UN takes up the Myanmar crisis on Friday. Well, CNN's Paula Hancock has been following these protests for us from Seoul in South Korea. It is an extremely difficult story to cover, as it is almost impossible to get access to people on the ground. The internet has been blocked for a long time. She has more now on Wednesday's bloodshed, and she talked with the family of a young man who was fatally shot Wednesday, giving us the story of one of the 38 people killed in a single day. And again, I want to warn you that her report also contains some video that you may find disturbing.
Protesters bang pots and pans on the streets of Vientiane in central Myanmar, unaware it's about to turn deadly. They duck and run for cover as security forces start firing. 22-year-old Zing Kokozo is shot in the head. His brother carries him to a waiting ambulance, but it's too late. Reliving that moment, he tells me, "My brother was shot and fell down. Blood was coming from his mouth and his head. I dragged him away from there, and he died in my arms." His parents say he was the breadwinner of the family, working at the local market. They were all at the protest together, his mother says, but were separated when the shooting began. She says, "We are risking our lives to claim victory. We don't have any weapons, but they are fully armed. All we can do is protest. They're shooting us with live bullets. Please help us." Makeshift hospitals were set up for the injured, treating a steady flow of protesters with gunshot wounds.
And now we're seeing orders that police and military soldiers shoot people down in cold blood. They're using 12-gauge shotguns. They're using 38mm rifles. They're using semi-automatic weapons.
Security forces were caught on camera taking 3 charity workers from their ambulance in Yangon and beating them with guns and batons. The charity says the 3 are now in hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. Is anybody safe at this point?
No, no one is safe. I mean, here, ambulance workers, people that are there purely to save lives, to help anyone who needs emergency medical care. They're not there to hurt anyone, they're there to help everyone.
The level of force being used by security forces has increased since Sunday. Dozens have now been killed across the country. Activists on the ground fear the actual death toll is far higher than that the United Nations has been able to confirm. Makeshift shrines are emerging on the streets where protesters fell. Funerals are becoming a daily occurrence. As Zing Kokozo's family prepares for his funeral, they say they hope his death has not been in vain. His parents praying the next to fall will be the military dictatorship that took their son. Paula Hancock, CNN Seoul.
To Iraq now, where an historic papal visit will go on as scheduled despite a surge in COVID-19 cases and heightened violence. Pope Francis will arrive tomorrow for a tour of Christian religious sites. He'll be the first Catholic pope to ever visit the country. Well, the Vatican calls Francis's trip an act of love. But it won't look like trips of past. Crowds will be restricted, and the government is deploying thousands of extra security personnel. Ben Wiedemann has been watching the situation in Iraq for us ahead of the Pope's visit, and he joins us now live from Baghdad. Warnings ahead of time that this is a risky trip, not least because of the security situation and that of COVID. And yet this trip, as far as Pope Francis is concerned, will go ahead. Why, Ben?
Because he has made it clear, Pope Francis, that he is determined to make this trip. He has watched since he was elected in the spring of 2013 the suffering of the Christians of Iraq and Syria and elsewhere in the Middle East during the onslaught of ISIS and its brutal occupation, and he wanted to come and express his solidarity to a community that not long ago played a key role in Arab politics and culture, but increasingly feels marginalized, really like strangers in their own lands. A bell summons the faithful to the Church of Mar Girgis, St. George, in the city of Erbil in northern Iraq. Christianity's roots run deep here. Prayers conducted in the local dialect of Aramaic, the language Jesus spoke. But his flock, which 100 years ago made up about 20% of the population of the Middle East, has dwindled to the low single digits. An ISIS mortar killed 4-year-old David Shmas in 2014 outside his home in Karakosh near Mosul. His mother, Doha, sees no point in staying. If someone will take us away, I'll be the first one to emigrate, she tells me. I wouldn't hesitate one moment. Me and my husband and my family will get dressed and go and leave everything else behind. Over the last century, revolutions, wars, chaos, oppression, and intolerance have driven many Christians abroad. In the last 20 years, however, it's gone from bad to worse, culminating in ISIS's reign of terror from Iraq to Syria to Egypt. The group gave Christians under its sway a stark choice: pay jizya, a tax on non-Muslims, convert, flee, or die. The Muslim majority in the Middle East will remain indifferent to the plight of minorities, Chaldean Archbishop of Erbil Bashar Warda believes, until the majority starts to tear itself apart. Iraq's once dazzling diversity is fast disappearing, including the smallest communities like the Mandaeans, followers of a pre-Islamic monotheistic faith that has all but vanished from Iraq.
What's frightening me is that during this period, no one have asked what we, for example, have lost when we have a declining number of the Mandaiyin, for example, and now Yazidis, Christians. They don't care about this, as they did not care when we lost the Jewish community back in the 40s and 50s and 60s. And this cycle is going.
If that cycle carries on, worries Archbishop Warda, Iraq will destroy itself. 21 years ago, Sabah Zaytoun moved to Sweden, now home to a large Arab Christian community. He's back in Erbil for a brief visit. Those who have left, he believes, have left for good. I don't think anyone will return from Europe, he says. That would be difficult. In a stadium in Erbil, rehearsals are underway for Pope Francis's upcoming visit. The first time a pope from Rome has stepped foot in this land where Christians and so many others have suffered so much for so long. Their voices, they hope, finally being heard. And of course, his trip is not only just about showing solidarity with Christians. He's also on Saturday going to be going to Najaf, where he will be meeting with the Grand Ayatollah Ali Sistani, one of the foremost figures in Shia Islam. And this comes just 2 years after he met with Ahmed Tayyib, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar in Cairo. So he really wants to build bridges with the Muslim world, in addition to the very important job of reassuring the Christians of Iraq that the Pope and the Catholic Church stands behind them. Becky?
And an historic moment here when he was on a trip here and signed the Declaration of Human Fraternity, of course, speaking to the idea of coexistence and living better together. I mean, how is this trip being received on the ground by everyone across the religious divide, as it were?
By and large, Iraqis are excited about this trip because it represents recognition by a world leader of the importance of Iraq. And, you know, we talk about the divide between Christians and Muslims, but on the ground, it's not altogether clear that really exists. For instance, one church we visited here in Baghdad, where back in 2010, there was a horrific slaughter, 58 people killed by terrorists from the Islamic State in Iraq. While we were there, Shia women came to the church and wanted to knock on the door for blessings. It's not unusual throughout the Middle East, where Christians and Muslims live together, where there is a certain back and forth between believers who share in the holiness of many of the places here. There have been some voices of opposition. For instance, on Telegram, there was a message by someone by the name of Abu Ali al-Askari, who purports to be a leader of the Kataib Hezbollah, which of course was the target of that strike a week ago by the U.S. just over the border in Syria. He told Iraqis, don't get overexcited about this trip by the Pope to Iraq, that he should really stay home in the Vatican and take care of the problems there. He also suggested that all this talk about religious dialogue is part of some dark conspiracy against Iraq and Muslims. Becky?
Ben Wiedemann in Iraq. Thank you, Ben.